Hey everyone, my name is Peter. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk. Tonight's a little special. I am not coming to you live via video, but I will be with you live in the comments. So I've just got a couple things I'd love to share tonight, but I want to hear from you in the comments. I will be there with you as well. And if you have not subscribed, go ahead, click the subscribe button, click like, send the link to somebody, share it. This is just a resource that we're creating because we believe that these are important conversations. So tonight, the topic is simple. It's who cares? Maintaining concern for changes that matter. And I just have one thought and maybe a couple ways forward that I want to share with you. So I look at 4 months ago and then I compare it to today. A couple things have changed. But if I look at the news and social media today, the things that are on there, two big ones, not going to surprise anybody, is the pandemic, is COVID-19. I didn't know what that was back in January, and now I probably know more than I want to about it. I mean, there's a Netflix special, and it's crazy. The other one, of course, would be just the continued fight against racism in our country. And now I'm going to bring up a little bit of that tonight, and I just want to say right off the bat, I'm going to probably say things a little bit not correct. I'm doing my best to learn as I go and be wise, and I don't speak out of any like an expert authority. It's just me. It's just Peter. I'm just sharing my thoughts, but I wanna speak to a little bit of this. So I've seen so many opinions and so many thoughts and so much expertise and so many people knowing so many things about the pandemic and about this continued fight against racism. But what's incredible is 4 months ago, these weren't conversations that everybody was having, but they were conversations that some people were having. There have been people that have always been fighting against racism. And in a totally different manner, there have always been people that have been fighting to make sure that if a disease hits us, we're ready. Now, these are two totally different things, but my point is now we all care about disease. We all are talking about how do we handle systemic racism. But 4 months ago, we weren't all caring about those things. So in 4 months, what are we going to care about? And what should you care about? Because we can't all solve all the problems all the time. And yet we also can't just wash our hands and say, well, it's just too much. Someone else is going to have to take care of it. I believe we have a responsibility. Psalm 34:18 says this. It says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And I can't help but think that it's God's expectation that we would also do the same. And I get that because I look at Jesus and the people that he interacted with. The woman at the well, which is an incredible story. You should go read it if you haven't. There was just these moments where Jesus would go to the people that no one expected him to. He would go to the people that were forgotten or given up on or judged as outcast or wrong or just labeled the people you shouldn't be around. And yet I think that that's him saying to us that, listen, the way that we are called to work in this world is upside down compared to what everybody else thinks. Jesus cared for those in need, and he cared for those who others had forgotten or given up on. But it's not enough to just care or show concern. We've seen that on social media of like, hey, it's great you made that post, but what does your life actually look like? I believe that it's not enough to just show concern, but we're called to action. The progress and problems that we enjoy today, hear me again, the progress and the problems we enjoy today is the result of the choices that people before us made. And so we have to make choices that are going to help progress the problems and the progress that we see right now. And Jesus tells this story of this man who was beaten and on the side of the road, left for dead. And the only person who came to help him was the guy who was really his enemy, the guy who he was like not a fan of. If anybody was not going to be the hero of the story, it was going to be this guy. But he was the one who saved him. He was a Samaritan, and that was not what you wanted to be called back in that day. You didn't want to be identified as a Samaritan to this guy that the story is being told to. And yes, I am butchering this story. Bear with me. What can I say? But Jesus says at the end of this, because the question was, I'm supposed to love my neighbor. Okay, well then who's my neighbor? And then Jesus asks at the end, and what he gets at here about who is the neighbor in this story was not that the man on the road was the neighbor, but actually that the Good Samaritan, the guy who everybody thought wasn't doing anything good, he was actually the one being a neighbor. And I believe today we're still called to be a neighbor. So let's talk about today. It is Friday, June 19th, and if you haven't heard, there is a holiday that many people have been celebrating for a long time called Juneteenth. I'm pretty new to it. I'm just going to be honest. I didn't know that much about Juneteenth, and I've been learning more about it and enjoying it. But just got to be honest, I'm not an expert, and I want to learn more. And me and my wife Nikki, we've been reading books, and but it's just incredible to see how Juneteenth, a celebration of a moment of freedom, of God's provision, when that last those last slaves, and I'm sorry if I messed the history up, I'm sorry, but those last slaves discovered that they were actually free. That was a moment of progress. That was a celebration that this is a good thing. And yet we celebrate it today also knowing that we have not arrived in the fight against racism in our world. Because these aren't just relational issues. These are systemic problems that we face. And systemic problems will require both an individual and relational change, but it's also going to require systemic changes, policy changes. We've seen it. You've probably talked about it. All of that. But here's the thing. Here's the question. What we cared about 4 months ago isn't necessarily what we care about today. But we need to be intentional and say, what do we need to care about in 4 months? Because some of us today are starting to care about issues that we didn't realize were a problem. Or some of us are being faced with issues and we have to decide right now, is this something that matters? I think there's two things that I want to just suggest to you as a way, but I'd love to hear in the comments, I'd love to hear you say, how is it that you are going to figure out what you need to care about in the future? And how are you going to maintain caring about that when it's not necessarily the popular thing? So here's my suggestions here, real simple. The first is this, is that change in this world will require change in ourselves. I believe that Jesus has called the church to be the hope of the world, and that means salvation, but that also means compassion and change in this world. If your viewpoint and your understanding or opinion hasn't shifted in the last month, 6 months, or year, or anything, that should concern you, because change in this world will require change in ourselves. This is an incredible time to learn and grow. And that means everything from reading books and talking to people and podcasts and all that. But if the things you care about today are the exact same things you cared about yesterday, are you aware of the things that are going on now? Because the world keeps changing. And while there's always those same things we need to care about, there might be some new things. So I'm just going to always encourage you as a person who is growing in any aspect of health, be open to change. So the second one is this. If you haven't ever heard, there's this phrase, it's called compassion fatigue. It's a real thing, and it's exactly that. It is when there are so many things to care about, it becomes difficult to continue caring. And I think compassion fatigue is real, but it also doesn't mean that we can just go, well, I've got compassion fatigue, I can't care anymore. See, I think we have to think about it just in the same way where if you are playing a sport and you start getting tired, you start experiencing fatigue, things become difficult. You can't just necessarily stop, but you have to go back to the basics and remember the main goal. Know your basics and don't forget them. And I'm not here to tell you what those basics are, but you've got to be self-aware. You've got to know who you are. You've got to know what your life is about. And there might be changes that happen that cause you to care about new things. But when compassion fatigue sets in, because there are so many things that we could care about and we probably should care about, know your basics, don't forget them, and don't stop doing them. So that's it. I don't have a big answer for you. This isn't a sermon. These are just some thoughts. But I just want to know, what do you think? What are the issues that you want to make sure you keep caring about? And how do we not just care, but act as well? Because I believe that Jesus has called us people to be the change in this world, that he wants to act through us. And so this is an opportunity for us to help the world. And we can't just care, but we also have to do something. And with so much to care about, how are you going to know what matters most? Thanks for your time. I'm going to be down in the comments. Please don't just say hi to me, but you can say hi. I'd love it. I'll say hi back. But tell me, what are you doing to care, and how do you sort out what matters most?